I think you and I had this chat before, but we have a very simple rule inside Mercer that your health and your family are the most important things in life. Nothing else really matters. It's all, subservient to those two things. If you have money and success, that doesn't really matter if your health isn't there and if your family isn't there. So we have that. We apply that to not only how we treat our staff, the policies we have in place.
Welcome to A Founder's Life, and I'm your host, Leo Gestetner. My guests and myself share our entrepreneurial journeys and our methods for a balanced life. And I'm joined here today by Ben Reed. Ben, thanks for joining us today. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Look, thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. So my name is Ben. I am the co-founder and CEO of a B2B technology company called Mercha. Mercha is the fastest, easiest way on earth to order branded promotional merchandise. So we make it really easy for businesses of all shapes and sizes to order quality branded merch they'll actually want to keep.
Excellent. Well, why don't we dive into your work journey and sort of how you got to where you are, and then I'd love to hear a little more about Mercha.
Yeah, sure. So I didn't start my career. I started my career, I think, on a fairly traditional path. I grew up in the U.S., even though I live in Sydney now, and I studied technology at uni, and I went into management consulting because that seemed like a logical place to start because I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And anyways, after about, I'll fast forward through a couple of corporate jobs. My wife and I in 2010 decided that we were going to save up some money and resign from our jobs and travel around the world on honeymoon. So we did that. We saved up and we left our jobs in 2012 and we traveled around the world on honeymoon after getting married in Bali, which was amazing. While I was doing that, I tend to get, I have to always have kind of a mental project. We had an incredible time traveling. There's lots to do always, but I always like to have something that's going on, that's keeping my brain active. And so I started a website that was kind of focused on the active sports travel industry. That failed, but I learned a lot. That led me to start another piece. That one went a little bit better, and that led me to launch a B2C e-commerce site off the back of that, and we ended up selling that. And as I was selling that, I kind of taught myself digital and taught myself the online realm and e-commerce. And I had a advisor, and I call him a mentor, but a kind of friend or mentor, depending on how you look at it, who had helped me, again, as an advisor and had helped me kind of execute the sale. And he had a gentleman that had worked for him who had come to him with an idea to digitize and streamline the promotional products industry, which if anybody on this podcast has had to order branded merch for business, you'll understand it is an analog industry stuck in the 70s. It is a huge pain in the ass to order it. And when you get it, more often than not, the quality of what you order is terrible. So anyways, Neil, which was this gentleman, he connected me with this other gentleman, Sam. Sam actually is like a multi-generational merch guy. His dad had started a merch business. Sam had worked in that business. They had ended up buying a merch business and selling it, but he never actually ordered. And he had to go through the very painful, long, and analog back and forth email experience of ordering merch and decided, look, there must be a better way, and didn't know how to do it, didn't know the technology and things like that. So that's kind of how we came together. And fast forward a few years, we launched in February 2022. We are primarily based in Australia. We do ship things overseas, particularly New Zealand, Singapore. But overall, we are disrupting what is a very analog industry, and it's lots of fun. There's lots of kind of subtle nuances to it, and we are hoping to make a real splash in Asia Pacific and beyond.
Exciting! It's always fun to reinvent an industry.
Yeah.
Let's touch on for 1 second. So you said the one of your first ventures didn't quite work, and I read an article the other day. I was talking about why I think we learn more from our failures than successes. And I think it's an important part of the path. And as an entrepreneur, it's most entrepreneurs have failed plenty of times before they became successful. I think it's just the nature of the beast. You're entrepreneurial, you're trying new things. What do you think you learned from the failure that then helps you later?
Lots of things. And I would say if you are not comfortable with failure, you're not comfortable with rejection, you're not comfortable with ambiguity, the entrepreneurial path is not for you. There is a lot of it. Like the startup scars I have, they are long and deep. I think, I'd heard this quote once when I was getting into my first journey that, the successful entrepreneur a necessary trait of a successful entrepreneur is be able to go from failure to failure without losing enthusiasm. And it is largely the case. But I think a few things I learned. Number one, I was quite successful in corporate. And to be honest, I was arrogant. I thought I was going to jump in and start a business and everything was just going to come together and it was going to be a huge success. And it was arrogant. And so that was, I think, one of the first lessons learned is the humbling experience of, everything has to be done. When I was at my last corporate job at Visa, I had an executive assistant and I had a team of people, and there were a lot of resources there available to you in a big company, and you have to do all of it, for yourself when you start your own thing. So I think, again, being humbled, I think having a better plan. And then I would say, off the back of the business that I actually sold, one of the most important lessons I learned in that business is we did not spend enough time really defining the brand and what the brand meant to us and what it would mean to our customers down the road. We didn't think long term enough. And we came up with a brand that, a couple of years down the road didn't really make sense for what we did. And it made it harder to acquire customers. It made it harder to, explain it at a barbecue. So it gave me a great appreciation for just brand and how powerful a brand can be. That's one of the things at Merch that we did right up front. One of the first things we did when it was Sam, myself, and Neil, and then my other co-founder, Brian, came on later, is that we really sat down and we said that these are our values. We want to do these things in a business, and we, don't want to compromise on these things. And we built a brand from the ground up, thinking, almost like decision-making framework, the 10-10-10. How are we going to feel about this in 10 minutes? How are we going to feel about it in 10 months, 10 years? And I think Mercha, and the foundation underlying Mercha really fits what we're trying to do. We try to be as light on the earth as we can. We try to maintain a very ethical business. I think we built a great brand up front. It's paid a lot of dividends.
Sounds like some great lessons. I think the other thing, I've mentioned quite a lot of high school students, and I've often said to them, if you want to make money, don't become an entrepreneur. I mean, long term, hopefully you make more money, don't get me wrong. But in the short term and probably the medium term, you're going to probably make more getting a good job.
Very true. I don't know if you pay attention to Scott Galloway and Ed Elston, but that's one of the things that Prof G, I think, very rightly points out is there is actually a much more stable, long-term, dare I say, easier pathway to wealth working for a big company. So, there's a lot of glamour around being an entrepreneur and working for yourself and things like that. But I mean, I can tell you, it is not for everybody, and when you peel back the layers of, being an entrepreneur and, running your own business, and there is, you really have to be, you have to be very, like I said, comfortable with failure, comfortable with ambiguity. You might do everything right. I mean, we have a tremendous founding team. We have an amazing team all together. And, we still, after, however many years, we are still around, we're still growing, we're still doing well. But, you're always 6 months away from running out, 6 months of bad sales from running out of cash, sort of thing, right? That is just the life of an entrepreneur. So you hear these stories about people going off and starting these great things, and they do happen, but people win the lottery too. So just keep in mind, I think, there's definitely a strong argument for, getting a decent degree that lands you a job at a good company and staying there and saving and letting compounding do its work, right? Save money, a little for a long time.
Great advice. And by the way, I mean, there's nothing quite like the entrepreneurial journey. If you're up for it, I mean, there's nothing else I'd choose to do with my life.
Yeah. If you're punishment, man, like I do CrossFit because, it makes me almost, gets to the point of every session where I almost want to vomit, and adrenaline and things like that. It fits my personality, but, it's definitely not for everybody.
So talk to us about family and what family means to you.
Yeah, so that is I think you and I had this chat before, but we have a very simple rule inside Merch that your health and your family are the most important things in life. Nothing else really matters. It's all, subservient to those two things. If you have money and success, that doesn't really matter if your health isn't there and if your family isn't there. So we have that. We apply that to not only how we treat our staff, the policies we have in place, et cetera, but in general, family will always come first. I say that knowing full well that my kids will probably see me sitting at my laptop tonight, But I also say that knowing that I've picked them up or dropped them off from school almost every day they've gone to school so far, which is, my father was an entrepreneur. My wife's father was an entrepreneur. Both of them were traveling for, kind of 2 weeks at a time. So I'm in a much better situation. And I think I try to be much more present with them. And I think possibly, our generation, as in, Leo, I'm looking at you. I think we are a generation of, parents, fathers that want to spend more time with their kids and be close to them. And I know you have a really good relationship with your kids. I love my kids. I love going away with them on trips. They're only young. They're 9, 11. But I love spending time with them. There's almost nothing I'd rather do. I think if you don't have those sorts of things, if you go and, become a great success in life and have lots of money and have, hospital wings named after you and things like that, really the measure for me for success is I want to have the people I love and the people I love back be sitting around, my room on my deathbed. And that's really all that matters. All of the other things are kind of noise beyond that.
I think I'm 100% on the same page. It's if you actually look at I literally last week posted an article on this, and I said, when I look back, success is not going to be a big deal. It's not going to be, it's the relationship I have with my children, with those that I care about.
And the relationships you have with people in general, right? I mean, the kids and I have this conversation as well. It's the relationships you have. That's really what matters. And that mostly comes down to your friends and your family.
Yeah, 100%. And when did you're living in paradise down under?
Yep.
When did you move to Australia?
So I'm interesting. Almost my 20-year anniversary. So it'll be 20 years in September, which is interesting when I think about it. I moved over here. I'm not going to tell you when I moved, how old I was, but I moved here after I'd been working in the US. I started my career in management consulting. I was in the US. I was traveling all the time. And my ex-girlfriend at the time wanted to move down to Australia. And I'm like, oh, great. So, I've got an American accent, but my mother's Australian. My father's English. I grew up, with a passport and spent a lot of time here growing up. And so I decided to make the move with my ex. And I wasn't planning on being here for 20 years, but I started surfing. In love with all the blue stuff in the sky.
And talk to us about what health means to you. You obviously managed to stay very healthy in terms of both physical, nutrition, mental, and whatever that means to you.
Yeah, so I actually wouldn't say I'm that healthy. I mean, if I put my BMI up, it is like I'm going to die any minute, right? But to be honest, I've struggled with my weight my whole life. And I think, I had actually a couple of years ago, a shot across the bow where I met with my doctor and, he said, look, you're just jumped on the lowest rung of your pre-diabetic ladder. And, I think my mom had died and sent me in a bit of a tailspin and I was drinking too much and, I probably wasn't exercising and being as healthy as I used to be. And again, it's always been an uphill battle with me, weight, always. And, but that really changed a lot of things in my life. I started drinking a lot less. I changed the way I was eating. So I, started, basically going from eating the majority, meat, for example, on a plate and less fiber to being more fiber, less meat, things like that. And, I have a goal, and I say goal because I don't always achieve it, but to exercise 5 days a week, which is basically what I've told I need to do. So, some parts of that have gone well. My weight hasn't come down dramatically, but, a lot of things have drastically improved. My visceral fat percentage has gone down. I don't often hit my 5 day a week target, but I try to go do CrossFit twice a week, try to ride on the weekends 1 or 2 days, and try to do something else active. So I try to hit those 5 days. And then in general, I just, I eat fairly well. Like eating well was apparently not my problem. I don't think it ever has been my problem. It's just I was drinking too much and, I live a fairly stressful lifestyle and cortisol levels are high and things like that. And again, I in general hold a lot of weight, but, that is, I would say personally, that is probably my biggest challenge is trying to balance everything. Right. And, so it's something that I constantly have to work on. And I look at it kind of now through the lens of like my kids. I want them to have a better, healthier lifestyle than I have. So we do emphasize drink lots of water, try to get lots of good sleep. That's been a real breakthrough change for me is I really focus on my sleep now. I try to go to sleep at exactly the same time. at least get in bed at the exact same time every night and wake up about the same time. So a lot of those things have helped a lot. I say lean mass is way up. My visceral fat's way down. Off the pre-diabetic ladder. And again, I kind of do CrossFit twice a week. It's about all I can manage. And then I try to ride my mountain bikes. My latest obsession is the mountain bike. So I try to get on that bike, on the bike a couple days a week. If I can go Saturday and Sunday, that's a win. And yeah, I just try to do the best I can. But I don't eat junk food. I don't drink, Coke and sweets and things like that. I don't do any of the kind of classic, these are the foods you need to avoid. I've never really been interested in that, frankly.
I think the first thing is recognizing it and deciding to make the changes. And it sounds like, you're making the changes that are right for you and therefore for your kids. I mean, I 20 years ago, I was 95 pounds heavier than I am now. I'm by far the fittest and healthiest I've been in my life. And I think it isn't one change. It is those changes that build up over time, the small changes you make and those habits that you build. And that allows you to I look at it as, for me, it's about health span. So it's about being healthy until I die. And I love, like you talked about your kids, I love that my kids have a completely different understanding of what it means to be healthy and what it means to be fit as well than I did at their age. And they've seen my transformation, which I think has influenced them as well.
No, which is great. And I mean, my hat's off to you to that. That is a tremendous achievement to lose that much weight. I started that moment for me, finding out I was pre-diabetic. I was 130 kilos. Now, like I said, I'm down about 117, 118. Ideally, I'd like to get down to 100, but a lot more work to do to get there. But again, it all comes back to, I think, like my father died of cancer at 46. My mom died of cancer when she was 77. I want to be around for my kids and their grandkids. I want to be there for that. So that's my real motivation.
Makes sense. And what do you like to do for fun?
So mountain bike is my latest and greatest obsession. And the only problem with that is you tend to spend a lot of time in hospital. I think I've been mountain biking for about 5 years, and I think I've probably spent 18 months of that injured. But I can literally ride from my house to arguably the best riding in Sydney in about, 10, 15 minutes. I love being out in nature. Nature has always been my place to escape and is where I find my center. So that's my latest. Before that, it was surfing. I was an obsessive surfer for about 15 years. And I still surf again. I'm actually surfing a little bit more now because my little boy is getting into it. But again, just like on last Sunday, I went and watched my little girl Willow, went and watched her soccer game, and then afterwards, we went and she wanted to get something from the shops for her mate's birthday party, which is happening this weekend. So I just went and hung out with her and just listened to her and took her places. And, spending one-on-one time with your kids is great. Like, I love it when they're together, but when they're together, they butt heads lots. CrossFit thing I like, and I did a lot. I did CrossFit for years before, to the point where I was starting to get injured from it. I'm not going to let it happen again that way. But I like that just for the buzz you get afterwards. And it's nice to feel, strong again. I think that's been really important for me as well in my health journey, is to know that I have to keep muscle mass. And I think, now at my age, it's the sort of thing where it's one of the most important things I can do for the rest of my life is keeping muscle mass up. But mountain biking would be my latest obsession, and hopefully it shan't kill me.
Nice. And you mentioned you work hard, as a lot of entrepreneurs do. How does a balanced life look for you? And I don't really mean a permanently imbalanced, but overall, how are you keeping things balanced between that sort of working, family, health, and getting in that bit of fun?
It is a constant struggle. It is a balance. Or I guess the biggest mental departure for me, I guess, from my first few things, where I literally every ounce of time I could put at the business I did, I now look at it as actually a hindrance. If I'm doing that, I'm not as effective. I don't make good decisions, et cetera, et cetera. So I've learned that if I don't balance, it actually makes me less effective. And I think that's a fairly common story you'll find with a lot of particular entrepreneurs who have done it a few times. But I try to always have times in the day where I dedicate them not to work. So when we all wake up in the morning, every day, my wife and we switch every day. One of us will make breakfast in the morning and make, the kids lunch and things like that. And, I spend time with the kids in the morning and we have our little dramas and, do all the stuff. But the point is we're together and we're spending time together. And so that's kind of a non-negotiable. And when the kids come back in the afternoon from school, whoever picked them up, supper time, there are no screens in sight. We do not allow screens on, the dinner table or anything like that. My kids don't have screens. They will not have screens until they're 16. But I try to be very present when I'm with them, and I try to block off those sets of times. My wife came up. Most good ideas in the family come from my wife. She's amazing, and one of my favorite ones of hers is we try to spend 20 minutes consecutive with each of the children at least 2 or 3 times a week. And it doesn't sound like much, 20 minutes, you're spending time with them all the time, but to literally just sit down, like I sat down with Willow on Sunday. I was talking about this, kind of afternoon I had with Willow, and I just sat with her in her room, and there was no agenda. There were no screens, didn't know what we were going to do. Didn't matter, right? It was just us sitting there doing whatever she wanted to do. Oh, Dad, do you want to play a game? Oh, do you want to look at my little cubby? Oh, do you want to do this? Oh, do you want to do that? Doesn't make any difference. The point is it was us hanging out, and, it was more than 20 minutes. So those things, again, I think when I prioritize what's super important to me, if I'm not spending the right amount of time with my kids and my wife, I don't feel good. They can feel the stress and everything building, and that's not good for any of us. So I kind of prioritize them first. I try to do exercise, second on the ladder, for kind of my personal side, and then try to work around work. But that's how I find the balance. And I think, shortly, the kids won't, from what I understand, won't want to be spending as much time with me as they do now, which is unfortunate. But I've heard this from a lot of people who have slightly older kids. When they hit their teenage years, they have their own things and they want to go do those things.
Yeah. And I can tell you, as someone who's got a 20 and about to be 23-year-old kid, happy to say that my kids love spending time with me. I love spending time with them, and they choose to spend a lot of time with me. I think you get what you put into it. It sounds like you're a very present father, and I think, that's a gift that keeps giving for both sides. That's what I've seen. What has been a pivotal moment for you in your life?
There've been several. I can think of a few. So here's an interesting one. This is probably a little bit different than a lot of the ones you hear about. My dad died when I was really young. I was kind of like the man of the house, and I didn't realize this until kind of a little bit later in life. But I had a lot of. It drove me to be a real people pleaser, and I did things that I thought other people wanted to do because I had this fear of loss, and I was worried about people pushing back away from me. And so you see this in a lot of people. I think probably more people than even realize it. That are afraid that if they don't act a certain way, this person's not going to like them, or this friend's not going to be one of friends with them, or anything like that. It doesn't matter what level, that dynamic happens with. I went to this, it was actually Burning Man. I went to Burning Man when I was in my early 20s, and I didn't know much about it. I went with my sister's husband, who is about as close to a father figure as I've ever had. Not to be too grandiose, but it kind of renewed my faith in humanity. I saw people there just doing things for the good of doing things. And, it opened my eyes to a lot of things, and it changed my perception on a lot of things. What I say is a pivotal, the reason I call back on it as a pivotal moment, I mean, this is like, I was 23 or something, so I was quite young. But I realized that I actually was doing too many things on behalf of other people, and I wasn't living my own way. And I was, following other people's dogma. And a lot of it came back to, again, that kind of fear of loss. And I stopped doing that. And I started being much more kind of, to be honest, being selfish as a person. But I don't say selfish in necessarily a bad way. Like I tell the kids, when I spend time with you, it's me wanting to give you that time, and taking time away from me to do that. And that is a gift, right? So that's not necessarily a bad thing. So I think that was actually a really pivotal moment. It was kind of the first time after that I went through a real period of introspection and figured out there were some things in my life that were making me unhappy that I hadn't figured out. And I would say that was the time. So how's that for something a little bit different?
Perfect.
Yeah.
So what's one piece of advice you would give to an aspiring entrepreneur?
I'll give you a few. I'm going to pawn them shamelessly from Neil and Brian. One of my favorite things that Neil says, which is very, very important when you are in this frenetic period, especially as you're an aspiring entrepreneur, you haven't actually started something yet. And it is go slow to go fast. So for example, I touched upon the brand piece before. We spent a lot of time, probably a disproportionate amount of time, putting together a brand that we really believed in. And I mean, we spent time wordsmithing and, we all really wanted to own the words on the page. What does the brand mean and things like that. And, that's a good example of go slow to go fast. That brand, the imagery, the visual and the verbal identity of our brand, presents itself everywhere. The visual identity is much more exciting because we look at the industry and we're like, this is a super boring industry, stuck in the 70s with no innovation whatsoever. So let's make it exciting. And the structure and the kind of, the foundation of it is much around, doing the right things by people, planet, where possible. And those things were really important to us. But anyways, if we had just rushed through that, I don't think we would have done it as well as we have. And I think the brand is probably one of our most important assets. Long way of saying, go slow to go fast. That is a very useful piece of advice. Another thing is, it is very easy as an entrepreneur to get pulled into lots of different directions. So we have another thing around focus that we call inch wide, mile deep. So we have a target market that is inch wide, mile deep, and we have specific, personas within that inch wide, mile deep target. And we specifically are building the product that we build for them, and we are solving their problems. And we aren't trying to solve everybody's problems, because if we try to do that, it'll dilute the product, it'll dilute our offering, it'll dilute our ability to communicate it to the right people. So that is a super, super important thing that I have always grappled with is, it's easy to get pulled into this direction. Oh, what if we try this thing? What if we try this thing? That's a good way to, it's a good, impulse, but you do need to focus a great deal and go really deep on what it is that you're trying to do and solve a really big painful problem. If you're not solving a really big painful problem, you're going to struggle.
Thank you for this piece of advice. And how can people find you?
So I'm on LinkedIn, Benjamin R. Reed. You can't miss the big purple and orange banner behind me. That's probably the best way is to just reach me there. You can reach me through the website. I think there's actually a link to my LinkedIn profile on our About Us page. So that's a pretty logical way to get there.
Well, thank you for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me, Lou. It was a pleasure.
And thank you for listening to today's episode. If you enjoyed the conversation, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, tell your friends, and please leave a review.